Welcome to Coffee with a Purpose. We're happy to have representatives from Family Promise with us this morning. Danielle Conti and Judy Dixon. I'm not sure if we've got others from your organization with you here or not. As is our custom, we'll start with super brief introductions of all of us. So you got a sense of who's in the room, who might have some prior knowledge of Family Promise, but I know you guys have gone through a lot of iterations and keep reinventing yourselves over the years. So we're super excited to have you. Let's start with the folks at MetroWorks. Martin, you want to work through those?
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, I'm Martin Kessel, your trusty co-host down here at MetroWorks and a longtime resident and town meeting member at Natick. And maybe we'll go to Cindy over in the corner there.
Cindy Bates, a 4 and a half, coming up on 5 years resident of Natick, live in Natick Center. I'm a trail steward for the CWAP Trail. And otherwise, that's pretty much my engagement.
Okay, Bill Ramage, trail steward at Pegan Cove. Big devotee fan of Pat Conaway and all he does. Active doing that and at First Church. And also on the Community Preservation Committee.
I'm Kathleen Donovan. I've lived in Natick 34 years now. I'm a member of the Library Board of Trustees. And for about a year now, I've been volunteering with Keep Natick Beautiful. I'm also a big fan of Pat Conaway's and happy to learn about your organization today. Thank you.
And you can either do a quick introduction now or wait till you do your presentation and introduce yourself.
I'm Judy Dixon. I've lived in town about 30 years. And I'm on my 6th day on the job as a housing equity advocate at Family Promise Metro West. But have followed their integration into our community since their onset because I'm part of a founding congregation at FCC. I'm also a Pat Conaway fan. I'm one of the admins for the Natick Runners, and we were thrilled to raise some money for them a couple of years ago, and I know a lot of people on there.
And I'm Danielle Conti. I've lived here since for just a couple weeks before COVID. So 4 years. My son and I moved here from the Midwest, from Springfield, Missouri, where I had lived for 30 years. But previous to that, I grew up here. I had family in Medford and grew up in New England and cute little New England towns and near the cities and on Long Island and in Jersey and then spent 30 years there and decided that I wanted to come back here. And I have 3 older children that are all grown and they've all moved back here with me. So it's wonderful. So my grandkids are here. And then I adopted a little boy. So my first job here in Massachusetts was at the Massachusetts Adoption Resource Exchange. And they actually hired me from Missouri through Zoom before this was a thing. So they were really concerned whether or not I was actually going to show up. So it was pretty funny stuff. But then after just a couple weeks on the job, we hit COVID. So I'll talk about that more later.
Wow, cool.
So that's it for here.
That's it for there. Okay. How about Carrie?
Good morning. Yeah, Carrie Butfield. Yeah, let's see. 21-year resident here in Natick. Let's see. Principally an environmentalist. I'm treasurer for Pat's Keep Natick Beautiful. A few other things. I'm the repair cafe guy. Speaking of repair cafes, I was helped do a lot of the maintenance work and startup at 6 Mulligan before the building opened up, and back working now as a part-time maintenance person. And just want to point out, Danielle, well, I'm from the Jersey Shore originally, but you mentioned Medford. You got to learn to pronounce things correctly. It's Metha. Metha.
I don't really have an accent from either place. It kind of stinks, but
There you go.
Welcome. Nice to look forward to meeting you in person sometime. This is, I guess, pretty close to
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Carrie. Paul?
I agree with Carrie on Metha. I've been I came at 5 years old. I'm now 72 years old. Do the math. I'm a veteran services director for the town in Natick. I work with veterans. I work with their families. I'm very familiar with your program. I have a brother-in-law that was involved with it before his retirement. It's a great program. Like you say, I deal with veterans and their families, so you're a great resource for my office. Thank you for the work you do.
Thanks, Paul. Chris Gentry?
Hi, I'm Chris Gentry. Been in Natick for about 24 years. And I've been involved with Family Promise for many of those years since it started. And I'm currently the coordinator for the First Congregational Church of Natick. So thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Chris. Elaine?
I'm relatively new to Natick. I followed my children, Josh and Jean, here. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and I'm an international advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities.
Thanks, Elaine. Sally?
Hi, good morning. I moved here about 7 years ago to be close to my brother, Pat Conaway. Wouldn't you do that too? I came from Southern California, but I love this community. And one of the first exposures I had, I started attending the little spiritual center. And when I first came, it was 2017, there was a family from Family Promise living at the spiritual center. And I just thought, my goodness, what an interesting concept. So I'm looking forward to hear all that you do.
Thanks, Sally. Carol? I gotta come off mute, Carol. There you go.
Thank you. So Carol Berkowitz, I've been living in Natick, this great town, for over 50 years. I'm thinking about Metro. I'm thinking about your organization and the time that Sam Gloyd, a good friend of mine, he left from there with his bicycle. Things. Yeah, yes. I can't remember exactly the date, but I was there at Family Promise to see him off. And he had been doing lots of work for Family Promise. And I love your organization. I do support it whenever I can.
Thanks, Carol. Pat?
Good morning. Pat Conaway from Keep Natick Beautiful. Very interested to hear today about Family Promise.
Thanks, Pat. Ricky, currently on mute. So if you can find the button. There you go.
Yeah. I'm delighted to
No.
yes. I'm Ricky Boy, a 62-year resident of Natick and a first black woman. That unfortunately, at the time I was on, as the one I live in Natick, I live in Conti, in the community, but Jay and I have been involved with Family Promise for years, working with Sue,
Yeah.
and working on many of the projects of Family Promise. I look forward to hearing what her successor has in mind to lead Family Promise forward. We support the organization and they'll continue to do that, and look forward to working with you in any way that we can.
Thanks, Ricky. Unfortunately, your microphone makes it really hard to hear. I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that, but hopefully you can hear us fine. And let's move on to Catherine.
Make sure there's nothing on top of her microphone, that there's nothing blocking it.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, it's a good idea, Ricky, it's hard to know physically where the mics are on these computers sometimes. But Catherine, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Catherine Doran. I am entering my 30th year as a Natick resident. I know a little bit about Family Promise, but just the tip of the iceberg. I connected to a young woman through the Don't Buy group several years ago. She was just an amazing human being with vision and joy, 2 young children, and she was in an abusive relationship. And Family Promise was instrumental in helping her move on, move forward, and she has done that. And I later saw her, I think she spoke at one of their events online. I heard her, and it was just exhilarating to hear the transformation. So I'm so grateful because I know one person in particular that's been helped. I also have encountered Danielle through a couple of groups, first the Don't Buy group, and most recently the Plant Swap group. And we exchanged, I passed along a little tree sapling and we had a few moments to talk. And as I was sharing earlier before most of you joined, I'm just overwhelmed with like awe at her kindness, her heart, the way she chooses to lead, how everyone matters in that organization and they're all there to support each other. And I really am blown away. The sky's the limit for what Family Promise can do with Danielle at the helm there. And hi, Danielle. I'm excited to be here and hear more.
Hi, you are hired.
Yeah, really. What a great testimonial. Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. Brinley?
Good morning, Brinley Vickers. I've lived here for 24 years. I've been on a few committees, a town meeting member. I know from on my own play group many years ago. So I'm so happy for you in this job. Very excited that you're doing this now. I think it's a wonderful thing. So hey, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Brinley. And Donna?
Hi, I'm Donna McKenzie, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Apologies for having my camera off, but I honestly just woke up. I've been watching too much news. I'm an academic in ethics, so it's important for me to keep up with the news. But I also have a long-standing interest in homelessness and have worked in homeless shelters and have in fact spent time sleeping on the floor of a Catholic worker in Hell's Kitchen in New York. So I'm really excited about today's presentation. I probably would win the prize for the person who has the longest standing ties to Natick, but I don't think of myself as old, so I'm not even going to go there. So let me say and I'm involved in many community activities and just love this town. So it's great to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Hanna. Let's see. As other people have said, longtime resident, town meeting member, various committees, interested in all things environmental. Also a member of First Congregational Church and also certainly been aware of Family Promise and supported it for a long time.
Great, thanks. And Doug, I moderate the group and also a longtime member of the church. That's where I first learned of Family Promise. But as I was saying, I know you folks have transformed your organization many times to meet the changing circumstances, and which is fantastic. I think a lot of organizations wither and die because they're not able to do that. So super excited to hear what you have to say this morning. We'll turn it over to you. Often our speakers like folks to withhold questions until the end of a presentation, but it's however you folks want to handle it is fine with us. So Danielle and Judy, thanks again for being here.
I do not mind questions as we go through. Feel free. I don't want to be boring in any way. So I go off script too much. So hopefully Judy will push me back. As you heard, Judy just started with us recently. And I wanted to talk about that just a little bit. So really the kind of I guess the soul of Family Promise to me is that it is grassroots and community based, and that it was started by a group of people from many different congregations who came together, put aside their differences and focused in on the thing that they had in common, which was that they were trying to help homeless people in their community. So I love that model. I love that spirit. I think that's really important. I think the other thing about Family Promise, although we are a national organization, we're affiliated nationally, each Family Promise is completely different. It looks different. It has different programs. It operates differently. It's all based on really what works in your community. And I think one of the things that they've really tapped into there is that homelessness is a very complex issue, of course, but you have to start at that community level. There are resources at the federal level, there are resources at the state level, there's lots of policy things that you need to think about and worry about. But you really need to be working with your local community to figure out what it is that we're gonna do in this community. So I love that model. I think it's important. I think it's something that we can continue to work on and maybe share with other groups. And one thing that really happened to us over the last couple of years is we changed so much. So pre-COVID, we were tapped into congregations, and the congregations really were kind of our lifeblood. The families that we were serving, which was usually 4 at a time, would travel from congregation to congregation, and they would spend 2 weeks at one congregation and then move to the next. And during the day, they would have to leave. And I think oftentimes they were able to go to the spiritual center and spend the day there, or eventually when we had a place, they could come there. So that means that families with children at night were at the congregation, and then during the day, they had to leave by like 6 a.m. I think for a short time, the Y also, or one of the places that has a shower, was able to help us give showers to the families. But for families that are in transition, that are really struggling, that are in trauma and the trauma of homelessness, it wasn't really very stabilizing to be moving from congregation to congregation. And for the children who were in a lot of trauma, we were noticing that it was very difficult for them to stabilize, because again, there really wasn't anything consistent in their schedules. And we had thought about changing the model, and then COVID hit. And as we know, all of the congregations closed. And so from 2020 to the summer of 2022, we built and renovated and started our own shelter here on Mulligan Street, which you are all welcome to come by and visit. And that model has 3 apartments that they have their own bedroom and their own bathroom, but they share a congregate kitchen and living space. And it's actually a part of our administrative offices too. So our offices are there, which we've outgrown very quickly.
Right over there.
Yeah, so it's right.
Yeah, next to the parking lot.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And it's a very small space. We need a much bigger space to kind of accomplish what we want to do, but I'll talk about that later. So the first step really was changing that in response to what was happening in our community. And because we're a small organization that's really funded locally, we can switch very quickly. We can pivot. We can respond to the needs that we're seeing and the trends that we're seeing. And that's what makes, I think, Family Promise a little different than maybe an organization like SMOC that's really, really affected by red tape and streams. And it takes a very long time for those things to change. But one of the things we did also was we said, as far as awareness and spreading, letting people know what we were doing. A lot of people knew what we were doing before through the congregations, because that's where we're mainly at. But now that we're covering a much larger area, we cover all of Metro West now. We also don't have as much contact with the congregations as we used to, because that model changed so much. It's how do we let people know what we're doing and how we're changing and what new things we're doing. So we wrote a grant. I hired a new communications person in January, and her first job, really one of the biggest ones, was the walk, but also writing a grant to bring on somebody who would help us with awareness and advocacy and kind of spreading just the message of what we're doing and you know, the complexity of homelessness. And so we were able to hire Judy, which we're really excited about. And part of her focus is just on really kind of, you know, getting to the meat with as many people as possible of what this is about, that it's a very complex issue that's themed in systemic issues of oppression and racism and in all kinds of things that have to do with inequities in wages, and the fact that here in Massachusetts, especially in a town like Natick, there were a lot of zoning laws, and those zoning laws prevented multi-use units and apartments even. And so now here we are with this huge housing crisis. And it doesn't just affect the most vulnerable people of our community, which quite often happen to be people who are marginalized in other ways as well. So it's quite often the Black and brown people that are getting hit by the hardest things in our economy and in our in our communities, but it's also creeping its way up to people who are middle class, especially here in Natick. So what we're finding is that people are coming to us and saying, I've lived here for 20 years in the same apartment. My landlord just sold our building. I can't afford to live there anymore. Or we had another woman who had come through our program a couple years ago. They were stabilized. She got a divorce. She no longer can afford to live here. Her son is a sophomore in high school. He has an IEP and special needs. And she's looking at, he's gone here his whole life, at having to move to another community because she simply can't find anything she can afford. So, and she makes a good living, but to make a good living here in Natick is different than to make a good living in Missouri. And the problem with that is what we're seeing is the number of kids that are having to move out of their school district is increasing. So here in Natick, we had a lot more kids that were part of the McKinney-Vento Act, which I don't know if you know, are familiar with it, but it's a federal act where if somebody is homeless, and their children go to that district and they become homeless, they can continue to try to send that child to that district, even if they have to move to a different community. So what ends up happening is a town like Natick, their McKinney-Vento children increased by 50% last year. And so they're having to figure out how to transport those kids from whatever community they're in, which can be very costly and very time consuming and really kind of hard on the kids because they might be traveling, I think it's up to 60 miles. So they could be traveling on a bus for, 45 minutes, or 60 miles here could be an hour and a half, I guess.
Danielle, who's responsible for figuring out that transportation? The town where they're living or the town where they want to be attending?
So Natick is responsible for the kids that are registered in Natick.
Okay.
And if you become homeless and can't find a place that's affordable in the community you're in, that town has to take care of it. So there's a lot of things that come up for me that I know Jody's gonna help me, Judy is gonna help me kind of figure out, because there's just so many different aspects of this. So it could save the school district money if we could find affordable housing within the district. It could save children all kinds of incredible trauma if they didn't have to go through that experience. They would have a much more likely chance of being successful in their own lives. So we could be changing intergenerational poverty and wealth and issues like that. So instead, we're coming at it from the end when we should be coming at it from the beginning, if that makes sense. We should be meeting these families at the beginning and saying, okay, you're having trouble, let's help you. So that's what we do at Family Promises. We try to find affordable housing for families, but we also try to keep families where they are. So we got a very large grant from HomeARP to help with that. And then when we wrote this grant specifically, it was so Judy could help us spread this message, and so that we could start to work with municipalities and with communities and with businesses in that community to figure out how we're going to respond to this challenge in the future. I think, in some cases, a shelter is just a Band-Aid. It's not a permanent fix and it's not a long-term fix. It's to help people who are living on the street, which we don't want our kids living on the streets, of course. But it's also then when they're leaving shelter, where do they go? Here in Natick, I don't know if you've looked very much at the real estate market, but there isn't any affordable housing. And even if it is considered affordable housing here in Natick, that's not necessarily affordable housing for the general public. So all of these kinds of issues that have more to do with policies and systemic issues, hopefully Judy's going to help us kind of tackle those, and then and share some of that conflict with the people that are in the community that can hopefully help us come up with some solutions. We've got some of our own, but we want this to be something that we're doing together in each of the communities we serve, because it doesn't do any good if somebody comes into your community and says, hey, this is what will fix you. It's really about us coming together. I love Natick. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful town. It's everything that I remembered as a kid growing up about a quaint little town that doesn't have streets on a grid. So in Missouri, everything is very much a grid, and it was to me very boring and yucky. When I came back here and there's just things going everywhere, I'm like, this feels like home. I love this. And so I'm really excited to join. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything either, but I'm excited to have her here. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, and at any point, please, I need to share that. Thank you. Oops. This isn't, I'm not the best at You might have to have me. There you go.
Yeah, then can you get that?
That's that.
That's nice.
That's there.
Yes, yeah, I recognize it.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Terrific. Great.
I'm a strategic thinker. I'm not an IT person. So as you know, we've been there for a couple years, but we really did respond to a need in the community that kind of pushed us into building the shelter. But long before that, we've been here for 15 years, or we had been here for 15 years, helping families with the help of the congregations, Muslims, mosques, really every religion has been a part of what we've been doing. And that's kind of the beautiful thing I think about this organization. Our goal has always been to help families transform their lives, families with children. We certainly have resources to help individuals that need help, but there are other services and other organizations out there that specifically focus on individuals, especially veterans, individuals with special mental health issues, and domestic violence victims. So we really have focused our attention on families with children because that was the gap that we saw, was that when people did get to the point where they needed to be in shelter, they were ending up having to split up as families. And we wanted to keep families together. And families come in all different sizes and shapes. And so we've had families that are a husband and a wife. We've had families that are two genders. We've had families that are a grandmother and a mom. We've had families that are even a father and a grandmother. And so they all look differently, but our goal was always to keep them together. And so in our shelter, they can stay together. In most state shelters, you don't get to be together anymore. The men have to go to one shelter and the women to the other. And so especially for boys that, might be 17, that's pretty frightening to be in that specific place. So we help families that don't have a permanent home or are facing eviction or shelter entry. So families that are actually living on the street or in their car, they may be living with a family. They may be living with friends. We have a lot of families right now in the current kind of housing epidemic that we're in. We have a lot of people that are living together. And so it might be a 2-bedroom unit, but you might have 4 families living there. And they're trying to help each other as much as they possibly can. But once, of course, the landlords find out, then everybody has to move. And so we get a lot of those calls that, hey, we are employed, we had a place to live, but we don't anymore, but we don't make enough. So what do we do? Our low to moderate income, like I said, what we're seeing on the whole is that moderately incomed people, especially in more wealthy communities, are having more and more trouble as we move forward. They have at least one child under the age of 18. And again, they all look differently, but that's what specifically we were trying to help was that group and their Massachusetts residents. We still do try to work with the immigrant population. And I think you have to be in Massachusetts for a month and then you're a resident. So we're able to help there also. We don't necessarily have all of the mental health resources and things like that at our fingertips like some other shelters would. So we really specifically look at a specific group of people that were not getting services other ways. So we weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We were just trying to help these people that were really, really close to being independent and sustainably independent. Our programs, so we have the shelter. I talked a little bit about that. We still do partner with a lot of our congregations and other businesses that come in and provide meals for the families that are in shelter. The thing that was really wonderful before about the model that we had with the congregations was that the families were staying there. And so they got to really build very quickly, sort of very intimate relationships with the families and with the people who were in the congregation. They built really strong relationships. And so that was one way that people knew about what we were doing because they were touched by it and had built these relationships. It's much more difficult when the families are in shelter to have those kind of moments that are a little bit more intimate where you can get closer. And what we found also is that people that are in trauma it's not necessarily really comfortable for them. If you've ever been in a situation where you feel like you're not providing for your family, you know, talking about that or having people know about that, especially for the people that we serve that are from different cultures, is very humiliating. And can be very, you know, it's further traumatizing to kind of share that story. And so I know somebody mentioned, you know, having someone at one of our events that shared their story. We've in a lot of ways really tried to focus on trauma-informed care. And so one of the things that we do is we try to tell the stories, but we tell them anonymously now, much more if we can. And we also, we're not necessarily trying to prove to people that, oh, this is a group that you should support, listen to their really sad story. What we're saying is that this is a group that we need to support because it's the right thing to do. And because in a democratic country, we can hope that it continues to be. That, you know, we all should have an opportunity, and we understand that systemic roots of racism and oppression have created situations where certain groups are more marginalized than others. And so, as most of us are freedom fighters in a democratic society, we want that to be something that everybody has access to. And so we don't necessarily want to put people on display, and I try to really protect the families and their privacy. And there's a reason for that. It's not because we don't want to share their stories or we don't want you to be touched by them, because of course we do. It's just that I feel like people, like we need to help people in a dignified way. They still deserve to have their dignity, even though they're in a really, really difficult position. Because, you know, I could talk about this on and on and on, but it is not necessarily because of somebody's poor decision making that they end up in this situation. So I think that's important to know. And we provide supportive coaching to families that have lost their housing. So that's the really unique thing about our program, is the coaching part of it, because a lot of places that might help with housing don't necessarily have the resources or the ability to provide really intense supportive coaching. SAIL is a program that once people go through shelter, SAIL is like the next step. And usually it might be called transitional housing or something like that. But what we do there is we take the families that are in shelter, once we get them to the point where usually all our families that come in are employed or employable, and we can help them get that. We help them get childcare. We help them find childcare vouchers if they need them, get onto housing, get in line for housing vouchers, which can take up to 8 years to get, so it might be a long time. And in the meantime, we try to help them increase their income and decrease their debt so that they can be in a position where they can sustain it. It's very difficult to do that anymore. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. So
What does it
SAIL,
say, what does it mean? What are those letters?
I do not know. Do you know?
What was the question? I didn't hear a
What
question.
are the letters? I assume that it's an acronym.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm gonna get it for you. The
SAIL
At
and
first I thought it
LIFE,
had to do with you're going out in the Charles River or something, but I guess.
SAIL and LIFE are both acronyms, and I don't know, but SAIL is basically you come out of shelter and then we help you get into an apartment or get into a place. We have a couple of apartments on Bacon Street. That's what Carrie helps us with, and he also helps us at the shelter. Thank you, Carrie. We appreciate you. And the apartments that are at Bacon Street are owned by the Natick Affordable Housing Trust, but they are kind of rent them in perpetuity to us to be able to use as affordable housing. So it's a wonderful model. We also have a number of landlords in different places, some in Framingham, some in Wayland. We're really working on trying to get them here in Natick, who will work with us. Usually it's through a congregation. A lot of congregations take their extra buildings that used to be maybe their parsonage or something like that, and they'll turn them into apartments, and then they'll work with us because it's also part of the church's mission, of course, to help the homeless. So they'll rent them to us, we become the leaseholder, and then we can kind of move families in and out of there as we need to. We're trying to get families stabilized, so we don't want to move them around a whole lot, but sometimes we might be able to get them out of shelter and into a unit where they might be for 6 to 9 months, and then maybe they're waiting to get their Section 8, or they're waiting for an apartment to open up in the area that they want to get to.
Did you want to jump in, Carrie, with a question or comment?
Yeah, Danielle, I was going to say, I don't know if I know about the whole confidentiality of things. I don't know if you are able to, just talk about the transition to 299 Bacon that just took place. And I guess that kind of demonstrates that the previous family sort of was, improving their situation in life, was able to move out of that shelter and into a different apartment. And then someone else is just moving in to take their place.
Yeah, so quite often we use Bacon for that. We have a family in there that might have specific goals. They might be finishing their education. They might be working on getting a specific training. We had somebody that came to us that had a veterinary degree from a different country, and she just needed to do the certification here in this country. And once she did, now she's the vet. We had somebody else who here in this country, she was a teacher's aide, and we learned about a program where we could have her transcript reviewed. I think she was from Venezuela. We could have her transcript reviewed and find out what level she would be here in this country. And once she found out, she was, I think, a third-year associate, and that meant that she could immediately apply for an increase, a teaching job in that school district. And that when she told the people at the district about it, she applied for a job. The next day they gave it to her. So that was how quickly we were able to help her transform. And a lot of people who come to this country, they may have training or credits or education from another country, but we don't know how it translates. And so learning about this one group that will actually do that, except it costs money. So we were able to pay for that fee. What were you gonna say? But anyway, what Carrie is alluding to is the fact that we have a lot of families that will stay in that Bacon Street apartment until they are able to do some of those life-changing things, finish their education, or even if their kids are getting older and they are ready to move to a different district, whatever it may be. The point is that they can stay there long enough to pay off their debt, increase their income. We have one family that is looking at wanting to purchase her own home, and she's built up quite a large amount of money so that she'll have the down payment for that. So we're really excited to see that. We think that's one of the best ways that we'll be able to transform families in the future.
Nice. Deborah, did you have a question or comment?
Sale is sustaining achievements for independent living.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, this is Deborah Mitchell, Native Black Lives Matter Emerita, a founder of that group. I just wanted to say, Danielle, is that you?
Yeah, she's there.
Nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you.
Do you interface with the ACLU or any other organizations that might help with these with people who are don't have the green cards or immigrant status? Do you have any problems in that area?
I mean, I'm a member of the ACLU and the NAACP, and so I try to stay abreast to whatever's happening. But really, for the immigrant population, in some ways, we have some obstacles there because it's difficult to get them employed. And so our whole model is based on helping the families get to a place where they can be sustainable. So our model doesn't work for everybody. The emergency shelter program is there for people who have a lot more obstacles. And so for those families, it might make more sense that they're in that system and they can be in there a little bit longer. We really try with our shelter program to have families in shelter for 90 days. And then we try to get them out to sustainable. Catherine, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah.
I missed it.
Good, Catherine. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My hand's still up. Okay. I would love it, Danielle, if you could speak a little to this group about things you shared with me a few weeks ago in my driveway about how you see engaging with your staff, how you collaborate, how you value each other and treat each other. I was blown away with that. And I really think it starts at the top. And I think it's a brilliant model. And I think it trickles down. And I don't know if you can remember what you were sharing, but just the way you value everyone and you encourage all the staff that work at Family Promise to treat each other in the same way. I'd love for people to hear that because it really touched me.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about that real quick. I mean, it's the same thing that we're doing, the same social work that we do, I think, in our regular jobs, helping families get to a better place. That is also what, I feel like I'm doing with the people that work for me. The staff that we have comes from all different, demographics. And we thought it was really, really important that we focused on having a staff that represented the people we serve. And so I'm just going to be really candid, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just have a staff of of white individuals if most of the people that we're serving are Black and brown people. And so there was everything that we approach from a DEI frame. So when we're looking at things, we're thinking about, okay, is this inclusive of everyone that we want it to be inclusive of? So for example, we used to say our families, and we realized that when we were saying that, we were putting this just really kind of weird spin on it. And it was coming from a place of us feeling like we almost had ownership for these families, and that they in some way could sort of like be grateful, I guess. And we don't necessarily want people to feel that way. What we want is for them to be independent and empowered. And it's not because of anything that we're doing, it's because of what they're doing. It's because of how hard they're working. And we're just giving them basically kind of a pathway to follow down that we think is going to help overcome some of the barriers that we have systemically, and they follow that path and we're able to get, but it's really about them. And so we stopped saying our families and we started saying the families. And I think with my staff, I apply a lot of that same thing. We are all valuable. We are all important. Everybody has different baggage that they're carrying, and it could be that you're carrying the baggage of your race. It could be that you're carrying the baggage of your religion. It could be that you're carrying the baggage of your gender or of your sexual orientation. And there are things that for each of us become barriers in different ways. And what I wanted to create, and what I'm still trying to create, is a workplace that is open to helping with all of that. So we ask people to take on the burden of, maybe some of our caseworkers have maybe 40 families. Wow. And so they're taking on the burden of 40 families. They're thinking about all of the barriers that those 40 families have, and that the children from those 40 families are facing. And that's a huge burden. And so I have always, from the very beginning, wanted to make sure that my staff was healthy and that the things that they were facing. So I may have a caseworker who has 40 cases, but that caseworker also might be up against some huge barriers. She might also be a single mom who is trying to survive in this world that is getting very, very expensive. She might also be looking for affordable housing. She might also need support in different ways. And how could we as an organization not only support the people that were coming to us for help, but also support our staff internally so that they weren't up against those same issues? So I'll tell you radically, one thing that I think is we have to pay our staff a housing wage. And if you're not familiar with that, a living wage is basically what you think it's going to cost to live in an area, like for food and things like that. A housing wage is different. A housing wage is everything and the housing included. So in an area like Natick, it's over $100,000 that an individual would have to make. Now, for a lot of families, that might not be hard because you have two people working. So if two people are working and maybe they have a job that pays more than minimum wage, because even two jobs at minimum wage don't make $100,000. But even two people, they might be making 90,000. They're still struggling. And I think as a society, we think, oh, well, that's a lot of money. That's great. Not when you're living here in Natick. And the problem with us not facing this in Natick and the Metro West area is that we continue to have people moving out. So we're becoming more and more segregated. And that's not the direction I think that we want to be moving. But anyway, just back to Catherine's point is, everything that I do is about lifting the people around me and empowering them so that they can have the kind of lives that they want, and so that they can see the kind of strengths that they have. And not only in my staff, but also in our families, we see some incredible strengths and incredible gifts. And we've actually employed quite a few of our families that have gone through our program, and give them an opportunity to step into a field that they may never have been able to get into, because most jobs say you need to have this much education, you need to have this much experience. And I'm able to say, if you seem like you have the soft skills and the hard skills that we need. I can teach you stuff, but I need a certain kind of person who is hardworking and motivated and open-minded and inclusive. And those are the people that we're pulling to the table. And then we can teach them the things they need. And for them, it's opening up a whole new area for them to get into. Internally, we promote. Internally, it doesn't matter to me whether you have an education necessarily. It's about other things for me. It's about experiences and your willingness to learn and what how hard you're willing to work. And then I'm able to promote people so they can get the experience if they want to move to another place, and they'll be able to get hopefully a higher paying job. But so everything I do is kind of across the board. I'm not really that smart, and so I just treat everybody the same because I don't really have the ability to like necessarily think about that enough. And I think that's important to think about them as much as we think about our families.
How many staff do you have?
When I started, I had 11. I went down to 8, and now I'm at 14.
Wow. Ben, I know Carrie's got a question too.
Um,
You're very gracious to say, Danielle, you're happy to take questions. Feel free also to say, could I get through the rest of my presentation?
I think
But
the
anyway.
questions come up. I'm okay with it.
Okay, good. Carrie?
Yeah, just a few minutes ago, you'd sort of say what the acronym for SAIL is, and then I was just thinking about the caseworkers. I'm not sure if their job titles have sort of changed recently, but Stefan and Bianca over there, two people of color and the work that they've been doing over the years, I guess, as caseworkers to support, the residents over Bacon Street and elsewhere. Maybe talk a little bit about this, building the skills that, the residents can acquire to help them lead a more productive life. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but curious about more about programs.
Can I connect something there? Just because if you're brand new to hearing about our organization, and Danielle's talked about shelter and talked a little bit about the supports that support those families who have been in shelter with us, SAIL is Sustaining Achievements for Independent Living. But then she talks about caseworkers having 40 families on their caseload, and so some people may be unable to connect the dots if you're serving 3 families at a time and then you're serving some families in SAIL.
Right.
How do we get these big caseloads? Because we haven't talked
Yeah.
about life. So I think that ties into what Carrie's saying
Yeah,
about the
so
full structure.
Shelter is a program, SAIL is a program, and Life is a program. So Shelter and SAIL are both run now by Bianca, and Bianca has shared her story a number of times, so I feel comfortable sharing it as well. Bianca came into our program as a recipient in one of these programs, and she worked through the program, and then she started working at Family Promise as an administrative assistant, and then moved up to a family support worker, and then moved up to she's the director of Shelter and SAIL now. And so that's really exciting. That's definitely something that we, try to do. Not only does she have that, that personal understanding of what the families are going through, she is very motivated. She's an incredible speaker, and she's really kind of I think a natural leader. And I don't know if that would have been as supported in another organization as I do, because she's a way better speaker than I am. So I like to have her speaking as opposed to me. And some people, that your egos kind of trip you up sometimes. So Shelter is 3 families, and that's what Bianca covers. And then she covers them as they move into SAIL. So Bianca covers the 3 families that are in Shelter, and she may also have maybe 10 or 12 families that are in the SAIL program, because as people move out of Shelter, they move into SAIL, and then they can be in that program for a year or 2 years. So she's getting up there with the number of families she's serving, maybe up to 15 or 20, because she's serving the families after they leave the shelter. So it's 3, and then it goes out, and 3, and that's go. What we have seen over the last couple of years is that although we can get families into a home, it is much harder to keep them in that home. And so we're trying to sustain them a little bit longer. So we're trying to have our SAIL and Life programs last 2 or 3 years, and the amount of subsidy that we're giving be a little bit higher so that they can try to pay off debt and save. We also have them go through different programs. We offer a budgeting class. We offer a landlord class, really, where if you're a renter, you can learn all about how to be a good renter and what the laws are and things like that. We work with Metro West Mediation, and they'll help if they have any kind of conflict with their landlord, where they can kind of work it out with their landlord. And there's a couple other programs that we offer, and we don't necessarily force people to take them, but the budgeting part of it, we do, that's a part of our program because that's such an essential part for you to understand, you know, where you are and what you have to overcome. So LIFE is local initiative for independent, local
family
initiative for family empowerment.
Mhm.
And LIFE started by one of our workers, Elise, who has been there since the shelter opened, I believe. And she started off just working with the families that were in the shelter that was moving from congregation to congregation. And she said, what we really need to do is start preventing and diverting people from going into shelter. So LIFE has two pieces of it. One is the prevention part of it. We're preventing them from becoming homeless and diverting or preventing them from losing their apartments a lot of times. So the people in that program will come to us and say, hey, I'm living in an apartment, but I'm behind $2,000 because I broke my leg, or I'm going through cancer treatment, or my boss cut down on my number of hours, or I'm going through a divorce, or whatever it may be. We'll step in, and if they're in an apartment that's already affordable, we'll try to get them caught up, because we might be able to see when we look at their budget that they really can sustain this, but they can't because they're so far behind, they can't keep up. So if we can just help them get to that point where they can be, kind of flat, then we can help them move forward. Sometimes it's just for a security deposit on an apartment. So we might have somebody who says, hey, I found an apartment, but I don't have because to move into an apartment, even an affordable one, you need to have first, last, quite often a security deposit and a realtor's fee. So if you're talking about the average apartment here in Natick being $2,800, $3,000 for a 2-bedroom, that's $12,000. Who has $12,000 saved up when you're working paycheck to paycheck, So the families might come to us and say, we just need help with that initial payment, but then we can keep the payments going. We just don't have it saved up. So we can step in there and say, this is what we can do. This is what Natick Service Council can do. This is what maybe SMOC can do. And then we'll work at we are never trying to be the one that does everything, and we're trying to be the last one in as much as possible because we want to utilize all other resources if we can. But then we'll step in and make sure that they don't lose that great apartment, because if they do, it is way harder to come out of being homeless than it is to not go in. So if we can prevent people from becoming homeless, yes.
I don't know what SMOC is. You mentioned it.
Oh, I'm sorry. SMOC is, it's kind of.
South Middlesex Opportunity Council.
Yeah, and they do a lot of the state, they do a lot of the state programs for homelessness. So they do the veterans program, the VB program. They operate a lot of the emergency shelters and some of the transitional shelter programs for the state. So
So is it a state agent? Or not?
I think it is.
County, South Middlesex is a
government agency then, or is it a?
I mean, I think it's the opportunity councils are the only one, those councils are the only ones that get certain kinds of money, but I don't, yeah, and they have to follow a lot of blue.
Okay, red.
Sorry. I'm going back to politics. So LIFE is a really wonderful program, and we've seen so much success for it. It started in 2018, and later on, I'll show you a slide of the kind of success that we're seeing. Families coming to us before they get to that really horrible place. And SMOC won't help somebody until they actually have an eviction notice. And when you have an eviction notice, it's usually just like maybe 2 weeks. Where we will come to they can come to us and they can say, we're facing eviction, but we haven't gotten our eviction notice, and we can step in and help. So they're not so stressed out. We had one family that was waiting to hear about tenant-based rental assistance, which is a program here in Natick. And it took so long for them to find out. She actually had a heart attack because she was so stressed out about it. So, I mean, those kinds of things are the things obviously that we're trying to, avoid and move past.
And how many families have we served in LIFE up till July? This is a number I've heard in the last week.
Yes.
We're at.
So last
47?
year we served 84 for the whole year, and I believe we're at almost 80 now this year.
At
And
the
we're only
halfway
halfway through.
this year.
Wow.
So the problem is definitely increasing. Steps to Success is a wonderful program run by a really beautiful person who just steps in and works with each family. Whoever wants to partake of that, she'll step in and help them with whatever training they want. She did training recently that was helping to write wills and things like that. She did another one that was helping people buy cars, like had somebody come in and tell them all that they could do to try to find a car and purchase one. She does amazing things. She's the one that found that certification program that helped the woman from Venezuela get her. And so she helps them wherever the family is, wherever they come in, she'll talk to them and she'll be like, she'll pick up on things and she might say, hey, you know, you seem like you're really interested maybe in becoming a CNA. Is that something that you're interested in? And then we can take them and get them registered for that class, maybe help pay for it because we have some scholarship funds. And then they can, you know, actually start a career from just meeting with Kathy and going through this program, a career that hopefully will pay them a little bit more and help them be more sustainable with their family.
She's also working with the Career Center of the Native Service Council, and they're creating vertical pathways within career fields. So if somebody starts in maybe becoming a phlebotomist, what could come next with a little more training, with a little more experience, sort of creating a pathway for continued growth, which I think is really innovative and amazing.
And quite often it's not a whole lot of money, but for somebody that's just living paycheck to paycheck, you might not have, you know, $600 or $1,000 to do a certification. So that's something that we can step in and help with also. Community services are just the services that we do where somebody might come to us that, you know, doesn't necessarily fit our program, but we'll do everything that we can to help them. The thing about the caseworkers is that, you know, a lot of them have lived experience themselves. And the last thing that they want to do really is have somebody walk away that is frustrated, you know, because they didn't get any help. So our caseworkers, you know, another reason why I have to look out for their mental health and peace of mind is that they don't want to say no to anybody. They have somebody call who's, you know, in distress and in crisis, and they want to help them. They want to do all they can for them. And sometimes they aren't a good fit for our program. And that's really hard for my caseworkers. And so this is something that we started where, you know, they could feel like at least I've done something, you know, maybe I've sent them to another resource, or I've told them they can follow up with me if they have more questions, whatever it may be. But again, trying to protect them a little bit, which is very difficult to do. This is what makes our approach unique. The family coaching, of course, is number one. Family coaching is done by coaches who have lived experience or who have done this for a very long time. Quite often, at this point, they may hopefully speak the same language. And that's really important. We have a lot of people that are coming to us that need help that speak Spanish or Portuguese or Haitian. And in the last 6 months, we hired caseworkers that speak Spanish and Portuguese and Haitian. And so we feel like we're in a better place to be able to help. Before we were trying to do, you know, translations, and it's just so essential to have those people on board. And the targeted subsidies, we really look at what is it that are your biggest barriers. Maybe you have, you know, a back bill that you owe city utilities that you're paying off each month. Can we step in and take care of that bill? Will that help you move forward and maybe take that money and put it toward your rent? And so really looking at the whole picture. And like I said, because our caseworkers have been through this themselves, they understand. And so they'll look at it and be able to be really honest about, hey, this is what you need to take care of, or this is what you need to do. Community partnerships, I think, you know, like I said earlier, the only way really to fix this homeless problem as we move forward is that we have to be working together, not only other organizations, but businesses, people in the community, and the municipalities themselves. There's funding that comes down from the state, that comes down from HUD federally, and that municipalities get. And so we need to make sure that the municipalities are applying for that funding, and then that they're using that funding properly. We need to have probably, you know, coalitions in each community that are specifically focused on affordable housing. I've asked a couple of times, what is NADIC's plan? And I can tell you that somebody in the community development department said, we don't have a specific plan on affordable housing for the future. And that scares me because we're in, you know, it's critical now. We need a plan. We would love it if we could build, you know, an apartment complex, or if we could build our own units and we could be able to control the rent on those units so that people could live there and live dignified, because we'd like them to be beautiful places, because nobody deserves to live in something that isn't livable. But we haven't, I keep saying that though, just even building.
So I live on Lincoln Street, and where there was the Catholic school, St. Patrick's, I understand there's going to be affordable units. Is that something that you looked into, or in terms of being able to lead, like, be the Uber leaser?
So, every builder that builds in a community, you are required to have, that community is required to have a certain number of affordable units.
Yeah.
And a builder, when they build, they're required to have 10% of
Yeah.
their. But if they have 25, this is a really interesting thing that I just learned the other day. If a builder says to the community, I will build 25% of my units as affordable housing units, all of the units are counted toward that community's
Right.
affordable housing. So there are ways of getting around actually having that number of units. So a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm sure we have enough. No, not necessarily. We don't. And affordable, like I said, in this area isn't necessarily affordable. So it depends on what that builder decides, that they're going to, I mean, it's market rate usually what's affordable, but market rate in each community is affected by what's going on in that community.
Yeah.
So they may have a couple units there, but sometimes they might be working with the housing authority, and the housing authority is going to be promoting those units. We're working with a builder in Framingham where we will be the ones that are promoting the units. And so we're hoping that we're gonna be able to get up to 25 units there in Framingham, which will be great. Doesn't help us right here in Natick, which was, but
how did you get in there, whereas here, like, do you have to wait for somebody to approach you, or you approach them?
Not necessarily. We have a lot of support from Framingham. They partnered with us a couple years ago to do tenant-based rental assistance. And they were finding that they had the money to do the tenant-based rental assistance, but they didn't have the services. And so they partnered with us to do the services. And that really opened us up to the city of Framingham, who said, oh, wow, you guys actually solved this for us.
Okay.
Why would we not use you? And so that kind of, that relationship flourished. And I think when I met with Natick, a couple times, I think, I'm not sure that they know entirely what we do. And so that's another reason for Judy is we are small, and so I don't always have the time to be at all of the different meetings, or meet all the different people that I should be telling, hey, this is what we're doing for this community. I thought I already know that about Natick, but really, we were kind of just connected to the congregations before. So it's almost like we're a new organization that's starting that awareness and that, that advocacy from the get-go, because we didn't really have those relations. So I think it will get better.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that in each of the.
Let me just say that your prior director is now a member of the board of the Native Affordable Housing Trust.
Yes.
To get more housing, the town turned over the area school, and that is a project where we hope to get at least 25 units of affordable housing. That takes time, but it's something that we're working on. And Joe Morrison is still a member of the trust. And part of the reason that you have more opportunities for affordable housing in Framingham is, first of all, because it's a city, it receives federal funding in the HUD. They have guaranteed funding every year for the Black parents, and so they have the opportunity to use those funds for affordable housing. In addition, our SNAP is the area community action agency that was founded in the 60s. I was the president of SNAP in the 70s, and they have multiple components for a whole host of things, housing being one of them. Employment, they run Head Start, they run Support Center, they have a lot of, they have legal services, they're a multi-purpose organization, and I'm so glad to hear that we are working fruitfully with them to place people in Birmingham. The rents of the general price of housing, the further out you go from Boston, the less expensive it is. So that what is affordable in Birmingham may be a little less than what is affordable in Natick. We are in the Boston, Cambridge, Oxford area for the computation of what is affordable, which is unfortunate, which is something that we should try and change. But I'm delighted to hear about the multiplicity of approaches that you are taking to homelessness and people who are near homeless. It's very exciting, and my congratulations to you.
Thank you. I think I got part of that. So the first part of it was the 25 units at the Natick Affordable Housing Trust is hurting. Is it the Auburn? Elliott School. Elliott School. And
6 Auburn Street.
yes, yeah, and that is, it's wonderful. I'm very excited about it. It's a long-term project. I don't think it's something that's gonna happen right away, but it is something that's on the books and that's gonna be great. I think if you were a part of that conversation at all, you also know how much opposition there was. And I think there continues to be in communities when you're talking about affordable housing. And I think that's one of the reasons that, you know, Judy has joined so that we can have these conversations and we can talk about why is there still so much opposition toward trying to make communities, you know, more equitable to everybody. I think you're right. As you move further outside of Boston, it does become more and more expensive. That's absolutely true. And what we are kind of looking at as an organization is if we have somebody in Natick and their kids are going to the Natick school, this is their community. And we don't want them to have to move to Worcester because that's the only place that they can find affordable housing, or to have to move, you know, to Connecticut. It's not a good, that wasn't a good example because they're expensive. To want to, you know, to have to move somewhere else. We want them and their children to be able to stay here because we know, number one, their children, that's going to be the least amount of trauma on that child. They'll be more successful if they can live here. Natick has a great school district. Why don't all of the people, you know, get to have a great school district? Because that's part of the systemic oppression that we have in our society. And so I think, you know, we want to keep those families here, and we did get some funding from Home ARP to be able to keep families in their school district, which we are very excited about. And I think at this point, let's see, what was the other one? The community action. Yep, that was something that was created in the 60s, and they do deal with a lot of different things that have to do with poverty, not just homelessness. The Community Preservation Act, I'm not sure if you mentioned that one, but I will mention it a little bit. It has some different funding avenues, and homelessness, affordable housing is one of them, but not the only one. There's some other ones there. So we are hoping that maybe we can, you know, possibly tap into some of that funding. I know that the Natick Affordable Housing Trust is also hoping to tap into some of that funding. And Sue Crossley, who used to be the executive director here, is on the Natick Affordable Housing Trust Committee. And so that's great. She keeps those roles very, very different, although she does, you know, advocate for affordable housing. She's not necessarily advocating for us. So she's very professional when it comes to that. And I mean, I think the idea that there's really nothing affordable in Natick, that's, you know, moving forward, that's what we need to think about is if we can't control the real estate market and we can't control how much people are being paid, because I think we know that and we understand that, you know, people are paid not as well as we would like them to be. Certainly people in different positions too. I mean, it tends to be non-for-profits, teachers, people who are, you know, in positions like police officers. Those are the groups that don't necessarily get paid as much. And that's unfortunate. So we need to make sure that we're helping. We had somebody who came to us that was a teacher and needed help, and somebody else who was a police officer and needed help. And here in Natick, we ask that if you work for the city of Natick, that town of Natick, excuse me, that you live in Natick. And so we're even getting calls from the city of Natick saying, hey, we've got this worker and they can't find affordable housing. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's a big deal. So I don't know that 25 units is enough. We need something more than that, and we need to keep focusing on it. And we need to know that even though that we've got this allotment that we're supposed to have, there's ways of getting around it. A lot of people talk about the MBTA ruling and the fact that we're gonna be able to do that, and it's really important for people to know that we're talking about a 0.5 radius, 0.5 mile radius around the MBTA stop. And it's only for multi-unit family homes. It's not anything about affordable and it's not anything about, you know, a large number of them. It's just to have multi-family units. So like these things are not the solutions, you know, and it's important for people to know that that isn't necessarily going to do it.
I just want to add two things.
Yes, please.
One is when we talk about keeping kids in our community who are at risk of becoming unhoused and not moving them geographically far from our community. A lot of our talk is always on minimizing the trauma to them, which should be first and foremost what we're thinking about. I just want to say that we need to also throw in that our community is enriched by their presence. So we need to start thinking about that as a gift to our community, diversifying the economic profile, the racial profile, and the cultural profile of our community is enriching to all of us. They provide us something if we can keep them here.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is just because I'm a data person and I'm looking forward to diving a lot into data. It's suggested that to be sustainable, that families spend 30% of their income on their housing. So when we hear, oh, well, they're putting affordable housing units in this beautiful 25-unit building, we need to be watching for what are those rents that they're charging, right? Because if they're saying, oh, we have affordable housing and the units are $2,000 each, that means the family needs to be making $72,000 to sustain staying in a unit like that. I just think what is affordable, what may be classified as affordable compared to the typical market rate in our community is not going to be affordable for families. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, good point. Deborah, did you want to say something? Deborah?
Oh, I had to go in and out and I'm not. Oh. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
I
we
had
can
to
hear you.
run back in because I was another Zoom. But I just wanted to know if you had addressed seniors or people with disabilities in terms of your programs.
We don't.
Seniors or
if-
people with disabilities, that was your, yeah.
Yeah, if they're part of a family, then we for sure try to figure out how to assist them. So some of our families have grandmas with them, and so we have had seniors that we've been helping through the program. Disabilities, we have the ability to help with a lot. We have a lot of our families who come in and their children have disabilities like autism and things like that. So even as a staff, we've taken some classes on how, you know, to help kids that have autism and things like that. So we do everything that we can. I think one thing that I was just resonated with me was that as far as our staff, even, I just wanted to make the connection that having a staff that is diverse, that can meet the needs of the people that we're serving, to me, it's like kind of a microcosm of this community. And the reason that you want to have a diverse staff that come from different perspectives, different political perspectives, different religions, different cultural backgrounds, you know, all of those things, is that I have a very, I'm a transformative democratic leader. And so I bring everybody to the table when we're making decisions a lot of times, because that means that I don't have just the benefit of my one perspective on making that decision. I have the benefit of 13 other people who have a very different perspective than mine. And that means that I'm making a decision that is much richer and much more possibly effective. And that's like the gift of it, is that, you know, selfishly, that gives me a whole lot more voices to when I'm making a decision. And that's, you know, that's what the community should be like too. And also I think business wise and like economic wise, you want to be able to have the people who work for your businesses live in your community. Because otherwise, number one, you might not have a secure employment base because people, I thought this was so interesting when I moved here from Missouri because Southwest Missouri is in the bottom corner of Missouri. So to go to Kansas City, it's 3 hours, St. Louis is 4 hours, and Columbia is 3 hours. So there's really nothing around there. Tulsa's 3 hours, everything's like, hours away. And we would do those trips in one day. Like if we wanted to go to a concert or we wanted to go see the Chiefs or whatever, God forbid, I'm definitely a Patriots fan. But we would have to drive 3 hours, and quite often you drive there and home in a day because you didn't want to pay for a hotel. And when I got here, I thought it was so interesting because everybody was like, literally, if it's over 15 minutes away, which could be 6 miles, nobody wants to drive there. It is such a different culture here. I thought that was so interesting. But anyway, so I just wanted to say that I think, we're missing out if we don't enrich our
I agree.
communities.
Well,
Did you have a follow-up?
agree with you. I wish people would say that and feel that way. DEI and diversity, yeah, that's important. Like get more breadth of and depth of perspectives. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess you've talked a lot about obstacles and issues that you're facing, but what are the biggest obstacles? What's next? What's the next phase for Family Promise?
Well, so we opened up the shelter and that kind of really kind of pushed us in the direction of, okay, we know that we probably need to have more shelter units because there's a lot of people that are really in need. Right now, the state had passed the law that people who are in an emergency shelter right now have until October to get out. So what's going to happen is this mass exodus of people leaving emergency shelters. And I mean, I understand what the state's trying to do, but unless you have places for those people to go, we're not really solving the issue. So we do need more shelter units because we don't want people living on the streets or being in unsafe environments where there's so many people in one unit. So that's one of the steps is that we need to take care of, getting them out of the homeless situation. So I would love it if we had a larger shelter. The next step is we need to figure out something with transitional housing and with affordable housing that is not regulated, but controlled. I mean, if the rental rates just continue to go, of course, people who are making minimum wage can't afford to live here. But to me, it's like, if you're only going to pay somebody minimum wage to do something that you need your community to do in order to function, then you need to be able to provide a place for them to live. So if you're not going to pay teachers and police officers and the gentleman who picks up your garbage and the gentleman who works at the fast food store or at the grocery store that you go to, if you're not going to pay them enough money to live in your community, then what happens is you have people coming to your community from a really far away, and nobody likes to go more than 6 miles. So where are you going to find somebody to do what you need? I mean, I think you're already starting to see that it's hard to get people to come in workplaces. I know there's a Starbucks on Route 9 that's closed occasionally now because they just don't have enough people to work there. That's going to continue to happen. And so I think you got to think about that. And don't you want your teacher to live in your community? Don't you want them to be a part of your community? And so the community, I think, has to decide, like, yes, there's laws here, there's this here, but what do we want to do in Natick and how do we want to do it? So your question about what's the long-term things, I mean, the things we're doing are trying to get more people to come to that life program before they do become homeless, or reach out to us before they get to a point where they're going to be losing their units. We had 2 families that just recently had to move because they went through a program, they were stabilized for 2 or 3 years, and their landlord is selling the house and they have to move out. Where do they go? There's got to be options, their kids go to school here. They were people who are, successes, and for our community, that's a wonderful thing. And we don't have any place for them to be. So we have to start to have that conversation of those 25 units at Auburn Street. Is that enough? When's that going to happen? What do we do until then? Does the city give us, places and then we refurbish them with federal money or state money. And then we try to get more housing for people. The housing authority and the units that the emergency system has, or that the housing system in Massachusetts has, they're full. Nobody ever leaves those. There's such a good rental, situation already that really we don't get any openings there. So there has to be
The
some.
wait list for the housing authorities has been shut down. It just recently reopened, but the list was like 13 years.
Yeah.
Here in Natick.
Yeah, everywhere.
I'm not sure which statistic I'm quoting, because I've been doing a lot of reading,
Okay.
and it could be Boston, but I know that Natick recently reopened their waiting list. Which means that you couldn't even get on the list, and it is years long.
So again,
So
there's
your
not
kids are
enough
gonna
of
be
it.
grown by the time your
Yeah.
opportunity comes up.
And if we want to change generational wealth for people, we have to pay attention to the things that are preventing them from being able to get there. And part of that is the wages that we pay to people that we think are doing jobs that aren't as important. Even as a nonprofit, I oftentimes hit, when I'm trying to advocate for my staff, I hit, oh, well, you're a nonprofit, so we don't pay you. We don't get paid as much as regular businesses. And, I understand that, like, we do this job because we're passionate about it and because we love it and because we have a calling to it. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to provide for our families. I mean, I'm the executive director there, and I'm very close. Like, I live in an apartment that I just hope and pray my landlord doesn't increase the rent on, because I'm not gonna be able to find another unit for my son and I here in Natick. And I wanna live here. I love this community. And I don't get paid a bad amount. Like, I mean, it's a decent amount. It's just, it's not enough for here. So those are all things I think that you have to be realistic about. In the last 15 years, Family Promise has been around. We've served over, very close to 1,000 children. 21% of those we served in 2023 alone. So that just shows you a little bit of the kind of increase that we're seeing. Last year, our families increased 30% over 2022, and in 2022, we increased 30% over 2021. So it's increasing drastically. We talked a little bit about these things. There's a lack of affordable housing units, the increasing cost of housing, wages are still flat. I mean, I think one of the things that we want to get out there and we want to advocate for is the fact that, like, to have a housing wage in Natick, you have to be making $50 an hour. So we're asking people to work, picking up, doing the things that to me are so essential for a community to have, like making sure that, we have clean water, that the trash is picked up, that our kids are taught, that all those things. And we are paying people $17 an hour, $18 an hour, and they can't, even two of them, if you're both working those jobs, maybe you can live somewhere else in Massachusetts, but it's very difficult to live here in Natick. And a lot of people are single, and this, again, I think this society doesn't really accommodate for that very well. Need time and individualized services. I mean, that's really where we're leaning, is that to undo all of the barriers of not only what these families have been through, but what systemically maybe has been a barrier for their race or their culture for a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. We can't fix it just with one touch. Like, we can't just say, oh, we're going to pay for your security deposit. Now you are okay, and you're going to be okay forever. Like, it's going to take more than that, because what we've been doing is oppressing groups for hundreds of years. So it's not going to be a simple one-time fix. This is the number of families. I just wanted to show you this growth. So this was Elise's dream, was to start doing this because she could see the need for life. And in the first year we had one. Now we're looking at probably this year over 100.
And that's the prevention and diversion program, keeping families from becoming unhoused.
And some of them will stay with us from year to year. So this is new families. So last year it was 54 new families, but we had 20 families that stayed with us. And we're probably going to see that more because we want to help them longer. So that becomes an issue. This is just talking about what I was just talking about. We need more time to stabilize. We'll need more time in the future. We need to, provide as much as we can. I mean, when you are in a position and you're worried about shelter for your families, it's like Maslow's hierarchy. If all of your needs are on, can I eat? can I feel warm or, get out of the out of the heat right now? Do I have shelter? If that's what you're focused on, you're not focused on those things that maybe for us, we'd be like, but why didn't you register your vehicle? Why didn't you get that extra mammogram? Why didn't you do that? You can't. It's simply impossible. Your brain cannot function on the kind of trauma that you're dealing with to remember some of those things that maybe would have been smart to remember, And this is just, again, just so you know, our families are incredibly successful. So 100% of the families that come into our shelter, they move from the shelter into affordable apartments. 100% of our sale families establish and maintain safe and stable housing, and 100% of our life families also do. Now, these statistics are for, the time when they're leaving the program, they're stabilized. What we're finding now is that maybe families that we helped in 2018 are coming back to us now. They were stabilized, and before COVID, we could be stabilized, but with housing going up, wages staying the same, and the other issues that are going on, we can't get them stabilized as easily. Reducing debt and increasing income, those are the biggest things that we can do for an individual, even up against all those barriers. So that's what we kind of focus on now. 100% secured, safe, and affordable housing. I mean, a lot of them can get a childcare voucher, but then you have to find a childcare facility that has an opening. And so that becomes a challenge. And they were all employed. So that's another misconception for our program and for homeless in general, is that they're not employed. A lot of the people that come to us are living on the street or living in a hotel, and they're employed, but they don't have enough money to pay those deposits or to get in there and pay the rent. Our ongoing needs. So, I mean, some of the things that we're looking at in the future is, expanding the shelter, trying to get more of the units in the community that we can control the housing, the rent on, and then trying to bring people in meaningful ways so they can have experiences with our program and learn a little bit more. So that's transformed a little bit. It used to be really easy for, like I said, for people to connect with the families with the model that we had before, and it's more challenging now. But we still need things like childcare and meals. We still need groups to come in and help us with things like painting a room or updating, an area of the shelter. Right now, we have a little area where the kids play, and we would love to have that updated. So we need a group to come in and help us, clean that up. There's somebody else that is planting a little garden for us. So we're hoping to have, vegetables for the families. A lot of our families are culturally very different. And so that was another thing that we found was, bringing in food for, somebody who's Haitian. They may not eat macaroni and cheese. That's just not a part of their culture. And a lot of times the families want to keep their food consistent for their kids because it's such a comforting thing for their kids to eat their food. And it's hard for somebody who's never made Haitian food to make Haitian food. So we're doing things like sharing recipes and giving ideas of where you can get that kind of the supplies that you need to make those foods. Some of our families have even offered to do like cooking classes with volunteers that want to come in and learn a little bit more about their food. And then, slowly we're not trying to get outside of our zone, but we're trying to figure out what else we can do. So all of our families are making those tough decisions between, do I pay the rent? Do I pay for gas or get my car registered, or do I feed my children? And so food insecurity and utility and gas costs are astronomical and can make the difference for a family on whether or not they can pay their rent. So we're trying to help with that. A lot of our families, especially if they're a single parent who works all day, their kids are at daycare, when they come home at night, they need to be with their children, cook their food, get them to bed, get ready for the next day. They don't have any time in that to go to a food pantry for a couple hours. It might take, again, it's more than 6 miles away. It might take a long time to get there. And then you've got to try to find the food. And a lot of times it's not culturally appropriate food, and then get back home. So we're looking for volunteers that might help go pick up food for families, or that might be willing to drop off food gift cards or get a grocery list from a family, things like that. We're just trying to expand it so that people can have those meaningful experiences and keep going.
Do they have vouchers for the farmers market?
I think so. Some of them, yeah.
Because
Not all of them.
Really close.
Yeah, not all of them, because again, the guidelines for what you have to make in order to get food stamps is so low that even people who are making minimum wage and can't afford to live don't necessarily qualify for food stamps,
But I mean, is
so.
that something that you could provide?
Oh, vouchers for that, that's a great
Yeah.
idea, yeah. Oh, that's such a good idea. At the farmer's market.
And also.
I feel like I could get a
know
grant for that.
If you're in touch with, Deb Sayer, like she's the head of the outfit. She actually spoke here a couple of weeks ago, but, I would just expect that some of the farmers might be willing to make an arrangement with you for that. So
Yeah.
that you would be paying less than even the government subsidy.
Yeah, that'd be
I think-
wonderful.
If I'm not wrong, which is possible, the groceries for families in shelter are largely still provided by congregations, yes? That's
Oh,
still
To some degree, yeah,
either materially or physically, right?
a lot of times, yeah.
But these types of gift cards and vouchers for the farmers market would be for folks in our transitional housing setting.
And in life, yeah.
And beyond.
Yeah.
Just taking that
Well,
one
that's
step
okay.
further. If you're there at the end of the farmer's market, some of the farmers might give you some food. They might, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or
And the
They
guy,
just- so they don't have to take it home.
from Northbridge. Apparently, and I had the same issue in Roslindale, because they have a great farmer's market. Apparently, beet greens is not a thing you can sell at a farmer's market. But beet greens are incredibly nutritious. And if people don't want the greens with their beets when they buy them, he cuts them off and puts them in a box and they go in his compost when he gets home. So I know that if I show up at 1 o'clock, that I can walk home with a bundle of beet greens and cut them up and freeze them.
That's interesting, yeah.
But greens are pretty universally used around the world as in cooking. People aren't that picky about their greens. Like,
Yeah.
I lived in Africa and people here would substitute greens here for what they would make at home.
All right, so I know we gotta go, yeah.
Sorry.
So, what we're seeing as emerging needs is just families coming back to us, especially needing food and helping with gas. We have been able to, because of some of the grants that we've written recently, hire some more coaching staff, and I think moving forward, that's what we need to do, because we want to keep our program as intensive and as personal and intimate as it is, because that's why it's successful. And then advocate for affordable housing. Thank you.
I'd like to say something, which may seem further off habit when we're talking about the elemental needs of a family, the food on the table and shelter. But this is a very important thing. I hope that family planners in dealing with its plans, if they are American citizens, that you have an element of civic education. Make sure that everyone is registered to vote. That is a very crucial thing. And if they are residents of notice, expose them to town meetings. The government is something that rules their lives, that decides whether or not there's affordable housing, that decides what the rules are about food stamps. All of these things have their roots in government. And every family should be exposed to the civic aspect of their existence in a community. That is part of who they are and where they are regardless. And so if you can start the conversation with the family, just so they know the importance of that, and you will be doing an enormous service. You will be providing people with support for affordable housing. Who knows, there may be one of your parents who has moved out, who is now on the side, who lives in Notice, who decides, I'm gonna run for town meeting, and I'm gonna vote when it comes to affordable housing, I'm gonna vote for it. So that is very, very important. And
I would be happy to help in any way I can to institute such a program.
Yeah, I agree. We do need to advocate for. There's a lot of things that, yeah, we need to advocate for everybody to vote for sure. And I think one of the things that we're really hoping is that as we work on those hierarchy of needs, we can get families to focus in on the things that they need to do for themselves, like take care of their own mental health and make sure and get out and vote for the things that are important and all of those other things.
Yeah. Well, Danielle and Judy, thank you so much. It's been a great refresher for us. So everything that you're involved in, those success numbers are truly startling. And I know a couple of people in the added a lot of the links in the chat to various organizations that you also partner with. So we'll make sure that those get in an updated email. So thank you again for joining us. Next week we get to hear from Reverend Cindy Worthington Berry, who's the new minister at the church that a few of us go to, First Congregational. I say new minister, it'll already have been a year this fall, but she's been.
It's a year now, Doug.
Yeah.
Is it a year now? Well, a year since her call. When did she actually
She
start?
started in October.
Yeah, all right. So anyway, we're all excited about it and we can't wait for the rest of you to meet her.
Thank you.
So,
Well, thanks
again,
for having us. Appreciate it.
all right, thanks very much.